let's try and I want to kind of organize for a second. Just two kind of different ways we can go, and I want to kind of try and approach this with a different set of tools. But basically, just to we always kind of just reflect back to each other. So Ken talked about two different topics, right? Kind of the first topic is, which I want to kind of talk about, which is about, well, how does the world work? Right? Am I responsible? Do I create the evil that happens to me? How do I kind of talk in those terms? I want to come back to that in a second. And the second is try and look at a particular structure of evil in the world, that is to say, an ethnocentric thinking, which has real spiritual experience, so interprets its spiritual experience right through its ethnocentric prism, and therefore that empowers it in a kind of shadow way to basically destroy that which violates the ethnocentric
and it's
God.
often stages.
Right, stages.
You can have very profound mystical experiences in states, and you apply it to your stage.
Total states. Just maybe just one word on states and stages, and then I'm really going to go back to the first part. I want to really kind of spend some time there. The second idea, right, is really important for its own particular reason. When you look at the stuff coming out today of the Bush administration, which talks about Sadr, right, for example, in Iraq, right, who's a major spiritual figure today in Baghdad, there's a kind of derision. The kind of assumption is he's not doing real spiritual experience, right? You know, he's not really, and what they don't understand is, of course, states and stages. The answer is Sadr is having real spiritual experience. He probably is having real satori, right, and whatever that means. And the reason people are following him is because he actually is reflecting, you know, a genuine experience of transpersonal consciousness.
Yep.
That's absolutely true. And when policymakers miss that, so what happens is it colors their whole interpretation of how to relate to this story, where indeed he is. Once you recognize there's actually real dignity and authenticity to his spiritual experience. The problem is, however, he's interpreting it through a particular ethnocentric prism, which allows him to draw certain conclusions. Right. The ability to understand that on a policy level has enormous implications. So I want to just kind of hold that for a second, and then kind of go back now. No, I'm going to hold it for a second. We're going to go for. We're going to have time for questions a little later on. Okay, just stretching. Okay, so I want to just kind of go back. Right, to kind of the first part, and just try and just work with us all for a few seconds, just to kind of frame the question. It's, what's the problem here? Okay, so both theistic and non-theistic traditions, although they use different languages, you know. But let me start with a theistic story. That is to say, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Quakerism, all those isms, right? And then when you really read more deeply, right, the non-theistic systems have their own versions of it, but it actually comes out to something which is very, very close. Kind of hold a bunch of truths together. So the first truth would be, let me do it in a God way. God is good, or Spirit is good. 2 is, God is powerful. Right? 3 is, God's all-knowing. Okay, omniscient, omnipotent. Right? All-knowing, all-powerful, good. That's 1, 2, 3. And there's a fourth data, and the fourth data is, well, good people suffer. So the problem is, it's hard to hold all those 4 together. Okay? That is to say, if good people suffer, well, then maybe God's not good. Or if you want to hold God is good, well, then maybe God's not powerful. And, well, if God's good and powerful and good people suffer, well, maybe God's not omniscient. Maybe God's not all-knowing. Right? And so the basic move, if you would kind of do an intellectual history, right, for a couple of thousand years, everyone said, which one of these 4 am I willing to let go? Okay? Well, God's not good, not bad, just neutral. Or, you know, God's not all-knowing. So there were all sorts of philosophers in the church, right, and in the Hebrew system that in the Middle Ages said God's not all-knowing. They went with Aristotle on that. You know, or maybe, you know, Harold Kushner wrote a famous book, right, called When Bad Things Happen to Good People, and his move was, well, poor old God, he's just not powerful. There's no real power to Spirit. He's kind of hanging out with you, but there's no power there, right? Or, here's 4, or the classical move made in both kind of Buddhist, non-theistic traditions and in all the theistic traditions, and powerfully, right, in New Age popular thought, which is, we're going to hold some version of 1, 2, 3. That is to say, Spirit's good, there's an order to the universe, there's a kind of powerful order, there's a kind of knowing in the universe, but you suck. Right? Right, you follow? Right, that is to say, and we're going to get rid of the 4th. That is when you say, right, good people suffer, actually, at that moment when you were suffering, that suffering was occasioned by you not being good. That is to say, a desire to hold the first three said, I'm going to deal in the fourth, right, because that's the place I can deal. So either you karmically created it, possibility one, right? We're familiar with that, or sin and punishment. That's the Jerry Falwell move, right? Sin and punishment. Right? It's a powerful move. Right? We kind of, in our own little kind of bastion, kind of make fun of it, but I want us to offer that it's just not, Jerry Falwell's not out there. Jerry Falwell's in here. There's not a person in this room, right? As we kind of say, Jerry Falwell, who hasn't experienced in their own life when something tragic happened, you know what? Maybe it is because I didn't fast on Yom Kippur, right? Maybe it is because I didn't treat this person right. That is to say, there's a deep, internal, human kind of need to actually accept that interpretation, and, parentheses, it's sometimes true. Let me make that clear. There is a karma in the world. There is a kind of system in the world. Sometimes we do create things in the world, but not always, right? And it's not a hard cast system, and a lot of times it's not true. So what makes us kind of accept it as true? Same New Age move, right? The New Age move and the religious move, paradoxically, is the exact same move, right? The religious people say sin and punishment. New Age people rebel against religion and they say, you invited that cancer into your life because you needed its energy at that particular time in order to allow you to evolve to the next step, right? We all know that, right? Everyone's heard it, right? Okay, so paradoxically, we actually trade in the old religion for the new religion, and we think we've made a dramatic move, but it's the exact same move. So what motivates the move? And we'll kind of just talk about motivation for a second.
Can we hold right there? Because
Please, we'll go back and bring up.
What you're talking about.
Yeah, that's enough time. Let's go on.
No. I think that I'm feeling Jerry Falwell.
Coming up.
Yeah. All right. EL brother. One of the great difficulties, if you look at the classic, indeed, dilemma, if you conceive God in a mythic form, is that you instinctively want God to be all of the things that Rabbi Mark mentioned. Well, God should be all-knowing, or that's not much of a God that isn't all-knowing. You don't want some God to wake up and go, sunrise and go, whoa, that surprised me. What kind of God? It's like, okay, I got to get me a new God, right?